dark, it's Wales, there's no street lights. And all we've got is this thick cloud cover that's going right across for as far as you can see. It had been raining the day before, all day. It wasn't raining at the time, but it was still thick cloud cover. And then eventually I saw this tiny flicker. And I said, it's lightning. And he said, it's not, watch it. So because I pinpointed it, I kept watching. And it came on again, and it came on again, and it had a definite uniform pattern to it. And we were like, oh wow, brilliant, look at that, you know. And then all of a sudden it stopped moving off to our right, and it kind of zigzagged really slowly towards us. Now I kind of begun to think that maybe it was following a valley or something like that, because of, you know, that gravitational ball effect that people talk about. I thought maybe that was, you know, afterwards I thought that was what we were maybe doing. But I didn't know the layout, I couldn't even really remember where we were afterwards. So eventually this UFO, it comes to be right above us, right above the house. And I can show you. And that is pretty much what it looked like. Now, we've had to reverse the image of this because we couldn't get to the front of the house when we went to take the photographs and do a little bit of filming. Because it's now not a holiday cottage by the looks of it. It looks like somebody actually lives there and we're going to go stomping around all over the place. There were some outbuildings here that we remember having a rummage around. They were all just ramshackle, but they've all been turned into dwellings now. So we were stood underneath this, looking up at it, directly up at it. And then a little while later, I don't know how long we've been there, time just doesn't really mean anything when you're in these situations. There was a strobe light, and by this time, everybody had come outside. We had, you know, we pulled them all out. The kids were a little bit nervous, but we kept telling them that it was the lights from a tractor reflecting off the clouds, because it was actually hidden within the clouds. You know, we couldn't actually see the craft itself. This is just to give you an idea. We could see the lights, basically, and they were coming through the clouds, and it was because of the different densities. The clouds looked, it looked like a kind of jellyfish rippling in the clouds. But then, a little while later, there was a strobe, just really quick, like that. And we turned around and I went, oh, look, there's another one. And there was a sphere that had landed on the floor. So, you can see my hood. Just about where the peak of my hood is there, that had been where the sphere was. And that was just pulsing this grey-white light and emitting a mist. So, you know, I said, oh, look, you know, there, look, there's another one. And everybody looked at it and went, oh yeah, and then promptly turned back and looked up at the sky and totally forgot about the one on the floor. I never get my head around that. Why, how could we forget? Why were we not worried? Why was this not impacting us in any way, shape or form? It was like we were watching some fireworks, literally. It was like bonfire night. So, we're stood all in the line, we're looking up at this thing here. I've got my son who's next to me, and he tugs on my clothes and he says, Mummy, a hand's just come through the hedge and touched my foot. It wasn't my imagination, I saw it with my eyes. And then he said, at first I thought it was the hedge, but then I saw it was a hand. So I turned to Steve and I said, oh, the kids are getting scared. He said, let's take him inside. Now, if he said that he thought there was a monster under his bed, I would have showed him that there wasn't a monster under his bed. The thought of looking never occurred to me, or Steve, or anyone. We just went back inside, and as soon as we got inside, Steve starts doing the washing up, Daniel and John go to watch TV, and the kids start playing. So I'm just looking at everybody thinking, what are you doing? You know. So I said, don't jump this, I'm off outside again. So I went stomping back off outside. Don't know what possessed me. Why would you even do that? Why wouldn't anybody say, no, don't do that, or I'll come with you, or anything? So I stomped straight back up the garden, and I stood right underneath it again, and I'm like this. Going, now what? You know. And they had some running behind me. 2 fast feet. Don't care what anyone says. They were 2 feet. Yes, it could have been a sheep. Yes, it could have been one of the children. It could have been a dog on 2 legs juggling with a little ruffle around its neck. But, you know, whatever it was, ran up behind me, bumped into my back, and then I was running. But I was absolutely blind. I could not see a thing, nothing. I was just totally blind. And I was actually running. When I realised I was already running. And I ran back in the house. completely, I was totally freaked out. You know, and I said to Steve, well, this has happened, and he just went, well, you haven't been out there long, so you haven't had any missing time. So I was like, oh, I don't care. Shut the door, windows, locked, bar, everything, bar ourselves in. It absolutely ruined my head, that. And everybody, it took me 13 years to find everyone, because we all fell out after that. We actually fell out that weekend. Steve and I, we phoned a taxi, we booked a coach, and we sneaked off at 4:30 in the morning, down to the village to get into the taxi to go to Wrexham, to get the coach home to Leeds, and we left John and Daniel there without even leaving a note because it was just awful. Everyone was just fighting. So we sneaked off, and when 13 years later I found them, and I was like, please tell me that this happened differently, I've misremembered it. Nope, both of them said exactly the same thing. Only Daniel said when they tried to leave the next day, the car wouldn't start, and they were stuck there another night, you know, and she was absolutely terrified. And the next day the car was fine, so make of that what you will. So I've not been back to Wales for 14 years. I didn't want to ever go there again. Part of me did, I kept saying I would go back, but I don't know, I didn't want to. And when I spoke to Steve, we talked about going back together because John, who was their uncle, became so badly affected by this that he actually took his own life 3 years ago. You know, and I was in a place where, for a long time, I didn't want to be alive either, because I couldn't understand anything anymore. I realised that the life we live is not what we're told. That there's absolutely nothing between the floor and anything else out there. And if anything wants to come down here and do whatever it wants to, it can, and no one can stop it. And that is one hell of a thing to get your head around, you know. And so when I found them, and I was talking to them, I talked to Steve on the phone for about 3 hours, because they lived in Spain, which is why I couldn't find them anywhere in England. And I said to him, how did it leave you feeling? And he said, totally raw and exposed, stripped to the bone. And, you know, I thought, well, that's how I felt. And when Daniel's moved back to England now, so I've met up with her a couple of times and we've talked, and she's the same. And then I realised that, wait a minute, I was the only person who went outside. I was the only person that had that fright. So why is everybody in the same state as me? Why? It must be that something else had occurred. What would they do? Would they just like, oh, well, they've all gone inside now, let's go? You know, when you start reading abduction literature, or at least even better still, talking to the people who it happens to, and not reading other people's versions of it, then you realise that there's something else going on. And if it isn't happening to you, it's happening around you, and it should be a cause for concern for everybody. Because this is unfair, that we're just left to rot and laughed at, you know, sometimes. Thankfully, I've got people like you, I've got friends in the audience who've carried me, I've carried them. Lynn, Dave, you know, they've been there for me all of the time. Lynn was one of the first people that I actually spoke to about it in 2005, when I went on a forum called UFO Magazine, and it wasn't anything to do with the magazine, but it turned out that the people who owned the site actually lived just round the corner from me, and our children ended up going to the same school. So these are the little things, these little coincidences that keep you going because you think, no, that's too weird to ignore. So I'll cut to showing you the film. It's about 10 minutes long, and this is my trip back to Wales for the first time in 14 years. I'm just going to wander off and